Welcome to this talk that I made up. This is the first time I've given this, and I've never talked about being queer and STEM before this, so if I get a bit nervous, be patient with me. But yeah, so this is my talk, Shaking Things Up, How the Messy World Around Us Affects Quantum Mechanics and Researchers. So there's going to be about 10 minutes on my area, which is all about what happens when you have quantum mechanics, but a messy world around it. And so, how energy can move around super quickly and, have all these weird, counterintuitive effects. And then also I'm going to talk about work I've done to try and make, the department where I work a fairer, more equitable place, and then a little bit on just little old me. So this is me. This is to give you a sense of the kind of man I am. So yes, Alexandre Coates, just Alex, he, him pronouns, and I am a final year PhD student in theoretical physics at Heriot-Watt, which is just on the outskirts of Edinburgh, and I'm co-supervised at the University of St Andrews, and my supervisors are Eric Gauger and Brendan Lovett, and these are the gracious people who fund me at the bottom. You don't have to pay attention to that, but I know nice people at all of these, so I feel obliged. But yeah, let's get right into our core metaphor. So, the world around you matters. So, this is my little illustration of an open system. So you have someone here sitting at a desk, drinking a coffee, and the circle represents whatever they're in, a room, a building, or whatever. And normally that's all that matters to you. If you're in a normal room, your temperature is defined by air conditioning, a radiator, or whatever. But there's always something connecting you to the outside. There is always some influence externally that comes in. A good example I like to think of is, for example, a fridge. Ideally, you want a fridge to be a perfect closed system. If you've got a cold room, if you've got a hot room, it should be 5 degrees in there. And that's not true. That's not true. You put some soup in there and the whole thing will heat up. It needs power to keep itself stable. We like to talk about isolated systems that are always the same way they are, but in reality, everything is an open system. Energy outside affects things inside and vice versa, and also sometimes things come in and out. This is also true for people. We like to think of ourselves as individuals, especially in the Anglosphere, in the UK and US and Australia. We like to think of ourselves as strong individuals who are unaffected by things around us. But that is not true. How people live, how people work, who they work with, where they live, how they live, that all matters. And so that's going to be sort of our through line here. So, part one, the science. This is a beautiful drawing of me by my good friend Eleanor Sherry, who worked with me, and I made sure to wear the same outfit. Right, so let's get into some physics. So, I said this was going to be about how energy moves on a really tiny scale. And so first I have to motivate you to care. So, here's the question. This is the lawn at my parents' house, I think. I don't know. So, photosynthesis. Why is it good? Now, I need to frame this question. Everyone knows why we like photosynthesis. It's the first stage. You have the nuclear reactor, people tend to call the sun, and then that comes down, gives, light, and then, plants can then produce energy and oxygen as a waste product, and then we get to live off of that and turn it back into carbon dioxide and all this. So it's very useful, it's everywhere, we like it. But we don't understand every single tiny detail because parts of it are quite obscured. So let's break it down to 3 parts: absorb, transport, and store. So these funky little things are sort of 3-dimensional renders of these complicated molecules that are involved in photosynthesis. This one is from bacteria, these 2 are from plants. Don't worry about it. So the first stage is, of course, absorbing. We all know this. Leaves have a color because they want to absorb certain frequencies of light, and they want to reflect others. And here's a key thing. Absorbing energy is a bit risky. Everyone here has probably put on sun cream at least once in their life. There's some light you don't want because it can harm you if it's too energetic. The same way, if you're trying to turn absorbed light into energy, at some point, there's going to be some light that's so weak you don't even care about it. So, so photosynthesis is very efficient, but it filters at this first step. So a key question for some of you is, what does it mean that leaves are green? I'm not expecting an answer, don't worry. What it means that leaves are green is that plants don't want green light. They're bouncing that off at you. If you go and look at a place where they try to grow plants without natural light, for example, the International Space Station, they grow lettuce up there with purple LEDs. Purple is what plants really want, and so on. And so they filter around that and they take in the light that they want. And we move on to this middle step, transportation. And so this is where I am interested, because, once you've got this energy, it's not very stable. It wants to hop around, and you've got all this energy around this molecule, and it's only got a short amount of time. I like to think of this as the hot potato stage. It has just got this big hot potato of energy, and it has a limited amount of time. It can move this thing around before it just drops it to the environment and lets it go. And so it has to be very fast to do this. The scales involved in this are so fast we couldn't look at this process until about 2008, when we got femtosecond lasers. To put a femtosecond into perspective, it takes 1 whole second for light to get between us and the moon. A femtosecond is less than the time it takes light to get from the front to the back of your eyeball. 2 centimeters. So that's the scale this is operating on. So we could not image this. We could not watch light move through one of these things until just over a decade ago. And when we looked, we found some interesting stuff. But I should first point to the final stage. Got a little battery logo. Here, energy is stored. So it gets eventually loaded onto an electron, and then you have all of the molecules you hear about if you've done higher level biology. So, you can then be, these two lines are a membrane in a cell wall, because at this complex, it can move energy from one side of a membrane to another. But I'm interested in this middle stage, but I'm not a biologist, I'm a physicist. So I don't care about all of this scaffolding. So this thing comes in a trio, and then within each of these is identical. So I just look at one, and here's the thing. Biology is really dense. If you see these little videos of tiny biomechanical things, like dragging things around a cell, those are simplifying things. Biology is ridiculously dense, and all of this is scaffolding and is serving other purposes. I care about these 8 identical little sites in the middle. These tiny crystalline bits are where this energy can actually be held. It will come in somewhere, let's say site 8, and then it has to somehow get out to, say, site 2. And here's the thing. It can't tell, it can't push things. It's just sitting there, and this energy is bouncing around. And remember the hot potato problem. It will only have time to do a certain number of hops before things get out. And we run those calculations, we guess, how efficient should this be? The old guess was something like 75%. You get something in 75% of the time, it works out. The answer is over 99.9%. Something is making this more efficient than we thought it should be. And that's the kind of problem I'm interested in. So, I said there was going to be a little bit of quantum mechanics. So, you might remember the classical thing is, that sometimes things are points and sometimes things are waves, and so on. So, that's what this wave-like stuff is. You can have a particle spread out a bit more through space in an isolated case. So, think Schrodinger's cat. The idea is you have this thing in this perfect box that's isolated from the outside, and it is not decided until you open it. So whatever's in there stays quantum forever, ideally. And then, the whole point is when you open it, you observe it. And observe doesn't just mean you look, it means interacting. So, air is going in and bouncing off, and it has to figure out, am I bouncing off a thing or not? So an environment, the real world, all of that stuff, is what causes a thing to stop being spread out like this and start moving like a billiard ball. A thing has to be in one place and can hop around. But, here's the thing. Biology is not clean. It is not cool. It is not at absolute zero. A leaf can get to 50 degrees on a 10-degree day because it is a tiny thing, directed to all of the rage that the sun can contain. So, these are not clean, nice systems. But, here's the thing, quantum mechanics is fundamental. It is always there, but, it breaks very quickly. But if your process is so fast that things are happening before all of this can fade away and collapse, you can get some advantage. Because here's the thing. If you're trying to hop between individual places, you can only try one point at a time. The nice thing with a wave is it can spread out and touch many points. It can explore more efficiently. But of course, you don't just want the wave-like stuff, because waves have peaks and they have dips. So there will always be some waves that are not where you want them to be. But, you know, with the environment, you can have a mix of these. A thing can spread out, then collapse. Spread out, collapse. All this over and over again. And so I study exactly this interplay. What is the right balance? What can the, you know, having the real world around, what's just the right amount that, you know, this thing needs to be sheltered from the outside world, that it will become better at its job and give us this extra benefit, and so on. And so it's not just this interplay. The environment, of course, makes other things happen. So to conclude, the environment's a messy way to overcome barriers, and I mean that very literally. It is not just that, you know, you can move from one end to the other, of wiggling like a wave and then being still. It's also extra energy. So, you know, the whole point is that, you know, sort of having the environment around, your system can, you know, sort of use extra energy when it's there. One way to think about it is, you know, if you are, if you've ever been on a trampoline, you might know that, you know, if someone bounces just before you, you can steal their bounce and be catapulted right up. And it's kind of like that. If you imagine you're trying to hit a button really high up and you can't quite reach that yourself because you don't have strong enough legs, or the springs aren't tight enough to catapult you up. The whole point of the environment is, sure, it wiggles things around and makes it harder, but sometimes there is energy just when you need it, and you can, these tiny bits of energy in a molecule can make jumps that otherwise aren't possible. It blurs things out, but at that point it means the edges are closer together. So certain transitions are possible, and also how things move around itself changes. And that's exactly what I study. So if there are any scientists here or in the audience on Zoom, this Monday I got my first paper accepted for publication. It should be out by the end of this week, or thank you, or next week. So feel free to look for my name on Archive or in the New Journal of Physics. I have studied specifically messy systems. Why? Because this isn't just in nature. We are building tiny things. You always hear people talking about computers being on tiny nanometer length scales, whenever you hear sort of people talking about, new GPUs, new CPUs or whatever. But we're building even smaller things. So, we're building, sort of tiny two-dimensional, one-dimensional wires with things like graphene. We are building, organic solar cells. So the idea of being able to, instead of using weird and hard to manufacture sort of rare metals, if nature can absorb light efficiently, can we use natural materials and build maybe less efficient, but much cleaner and easier, and easier to source materials for the next generation of solar cells? Also, people are building electronic devices out of individual molecules. Oops. So my job is, even though these things are tiny, you can't make anything perfectly. So my work has been studying exactly messy systems, and how, when you can measure the messiness, you can figure out just how much boost from the environment you need. And then maybe you can design and tweak it to make it a bit better. So feel free to look me up for that. Anyway, that was your whistle-stop tour of quantum mechanics. We now go into the pit of life. This is me, and yeah, talking about the other stuff I do. So I have been at Heriot-Watt. For 2.5 of my 3 years, I have been a student representative. So I have been involved for representing all of the physics PhD students in lots of various ways. Some things are big and collaborative, other things are small, specific things I have tried. And I've tried to bring this spirit to, my personal life as I have, in the scientific life. I really care about, how people live, how they work, what rights they have. Because, as everyone knows, British people are too reserved. People have rights and they don't exercise them, and then things get taken away. When people don't know their rights, people are exploited without anyone being mean. If you don't know what you're allowed, people will accidentally take it from you. So let's do a whistle-stop tour. Here are places I have been. I did my undergraduate and master's at the University of Birmingham as an experimental physicist. I wasn't meant to end up in all of this. I did a year abroad at the University of Heidelberg, and I did a 6-month stint at the National Physical Laboratory, and I'm currently entering year 4 at Heriot-Watt University. And the thing with workplaces, the thing with universities is things are incredibly local. What's normal in one place is not normal in another. Birmingham has an extremely active queer STEM scene. There's Out in STEM. They, in fact, you know, myself and Claire first encountered each other at an the LGBT STEminar because they moved LGBT STEM Day, didn't they? Used to be February, yeah. Used to July, yeah, and so on. So Birmingham University, you know, I attended events like that, and it was very good for me to know that there were lots and lots of people out in STEM. The LGBT society was a third physicists, I think. It was ridiculous. It was hilarious. At Heidelberg, well, yeah, I was just there briefly, so I didn't get involved in what was at the university. But at the National Physical Laboratory, I was there for the very first LGBT STEM Day. And they hosted something. We had Prospect, who are a union for technicians and scientists and archivists, all kinds of things, come in and talk about how you can make a workplace better for queer people. And that really inspired me, and so on, to see that. Now, things didn't work out with Birmingham University. I decided to stop at the master's instead of going on to the PhD and jump to the big wide world of theory in Heriot-Watt. And so here's what I've been involved in since. So this is the most text you'll get on a slide from me, don't worry. But these are the things I've been involved in. I've hosted and ran various pub quizzes on a terrifying array of subjects. I co-designed, I took off all the co's from all of these because they were just, too redundant. But everything here was done with a lot of help. But I've hosted and ran quizzes. I ran special ones during February for Pride Month where, I had the special round where I had all of these historical queer figures and I gave basically a paragraph of background detail and information about them, what was known about them, etc. It's one of these goofier things, but a student pulled me aside after and gave me a very earnest thanks, which I still remember. I designed a new mentorship scheme and so on with my great friend Karen Craigie. We felt students needed more support. They didn't know who to ask for career advice. They didn't know what they should be doing in each year. So we designed a new scheme, and that's being rolled out across the university. I pushed for PGR pay rises and so on because, again, when people don't know their rights, a lot of PhD students have not been in formal employment before. They've often gone straight up the university track. These things have been left behind. I'm a theorist in a mostly experimental department. So the people we invite don't talk about things I do. So I started and I still run a thing where I invite external speakers. I got the mental health team to run a mental health workshop. I redesigned a thesis template. It's a small thing, but it's an annoyance everyone had. And I pushed for equal sick leave between PhD students, and this is specifically during COVID. So a point I want to make here is I am a relatively privileged PhD student. I don't just mean that because I'm obviously middle class. I mean it because I'm on a scheme that is very well funded. As you saw the logos at the beginning. Those are institutes that fund me and give me certain sick leave. They give me certain rights to take sick leave, and so on. And those rights only came around in 2019. This was not, sick leave was not up to the national standard beforehand. But during COVID, this became an important point because lots of students, their rules are only decided by their department. So you might have a different rule in biology and in sociology than you do in physics. And so the thing is, I could argue for a position of privilege and go, look, I have this standard. It seems unfair to force them on the same standard. And luckily, they happily agreed. I didn't have to fight, but if I and the other reps had not asked, these things wouldn't happen. Other things involve, for 2-3 years now, I've been emailing out LGBTQ plus events happening nationally. So, I've emailed out, every LGBT STEM day that's happened, the LGBT STEminars, sort of one-off things, and so on. But you'll notice that these are pretty general. Outside of this and like a special quiz, I have not done much that is super specifically targeted for minoritized students. And often, for me, that is just because, well, the minoritized students are going to benefit more than the privileged students from general stuff. You know, if you are less likely to, you know, have a supportive family, a pay rise matters more to you. If you are more likely to be ill or need to care for someone, sick leave matters more to you. I say I've been mailing out things. I say this because it's been a task. I'm here because there is not much for queer students at my institute specifically. I have never met hostility. I work with a fantastic group, but just historically, there was never a point where someone got funding and things got the ball rolling. So despite the fact that I work with fantastic people, there is not even a rainbow lanyard scheme, there is not all of this stuff. I've never had a reply in 3 years. There's been an email once from an academic in like my giant department, shared with biology and chemistry and all this. There's been one that wasn't sent by me that was about queer stuff. So, I did that for the same reason I'm here. I want to be visible. So this is the sad slide, I'm sorry. So, being out. Am I out? It's a weird question to ask, but unless you have, you've seen the badge, you've seen the he, him pronouns maybe, there's not much particularly visible about being asexual. That said, no one has ever been surprised when I've told them I'm queer. I don't mask. This is how I am. I'm featured under the D for diversity on the Instagram page for my university. And you see it is, you see sort of a cavalcade of people, then there's me at a whiteboard dressed exactly like this. And it looks like someone let a rampant poet run through the department. This has been an issue. This has been an issue my entire life. At Birmingham, I regularly, I would just be sitting on a bench. Someone would be like, "Oh, do you know where this building is?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." They go, "What do you study?" I go, "Oh, physics." They're like, "No." It's like, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh, your art history or philosophy." I'm like, "Oh," and so on. But yeah, I want to nail in this point, which is, there's very few things visually for someone like me that forces me to be out, especially when there's not even events. And so on. And, I have emailed people and gone, "Hey, who wants to come to the LGBT seminar in Birmingham? I have been before, I know the people, I will show you around." Has that outed me? Has that not? This is, I guess, what we talk about of sort of the more passive effects if there not being diversity around. I have to talk about being out of place. That's not just me dressing like a poet, but the fact is, science is not particularly diverse racially either. This is kind of what I mean by an interesting 2 years. Every time I look, for whether it's black or mixed is a separate category that I technically fall into, it's rounding up to 1%. For mixed race students and all this, especially on people with prestigious funding schemes like I have. There's, I think, maybe 10, 20 mixed race physicists who started the year I did. It is the worst stat, only matched by, black students and so on. So it doesn't matter which bucket I fall into, they're equally small. And it's been the same thing, it's visible. I know that there are other students out there like me, but they're almost never studying the same thing. I don't talk to people who look like me at conferences. And over last summer with Black Lives Matter, very few institutes rose to that challenge to say something. I had to explicitly tell someone who asked me if there was a plan to address this. There was a statement. This has had a toll on me, along with the general isolation in COVID. This said, I'm very happy that I've done this PhD. I have met so many wonderful people. And honestly, had it not been for, sort of Black Lives Matter and some bad incidents I don't want to get into around that, for me, really, it's all of a piece. For me, the longest thing has been the queer aspect. I don't know if I can tell people. I'm obviously black. People know that. If they're going to be racist, then they'll be in my face. And then I can just ignore them. I'm a theorist. I just need a laptop. It's fine. It's quite easy to avoid them, and so on. But, you know, when you have an issue where, you know, things aren't clear and visible, there is that worry and there is that toll. And all I can really say about that is that, you know, there are always other places. If you are in a workplace or if you're at a university that doesn't have much, you don't have to do everything there. You can find, for example, at, you know, a university, the thing I'm at today is a perfect example. You know, people will be coming here and they may not, you know, they don't have to go to the University of Exeter, they don't have to live here. You know, I took a train at sunrise and it was sunset when I arrived, and so on. You can travel around, okay? So, you know, if, you know, there are things available to you and you can attend. Anyone who is running something like this is always happy to welcome you, okay? You know, there are lots of things at other universities. Everyone I've talked to at them has always given advice. Just ask, you know, we'll happily welcome you. No one asks questions. The first time I went to the LGBT Society at Birmingham, I went 3 weeks in a row, and you know, someone was like, "Oh, are you just here for the biscuits?" It's like, no, I am. They're good biscuits, and so on. But yeah, as long as, you know, you're respectful, you can find something. You know, it does not have to be where you are. I'm going to end on some principles. This is the final slide. Where you have privilege, use it. If you have an advantage, you can always point out the distinction and try to help build other people up. Nothing is more vital than community. You know, I don't know if there are any out lecturers in my university, but I know the one who sent out the mailing list. I know that he is an ally. I know, you know, I know individual people who are out to me, and so on. Finding your community, whether locally or where you are, is the most important thing, and also for organizing stuff. Organizing this takes a lot of work. Organizing the events I do takes a lot of work, and you need friends. We all need community. This middle point is this more niche one where, you know, people really want to do the specific things, the targeted things, and so on, you know. And I have tried working that. I've tried to get, you know, university to slightly spruce up the preferred name system, for example. I have tried to get, I tried to get funding for improved signage for, you know, where are disabled bathrooms. I tried to get a better allocation of gender-neutral bathrooms. These things are tied in very large estates problems where the funding ends up being millions of pounds or tens of thousands. Sometimes you can get a bigger win for cheaper. Remember, if you're helping everyone, you're helping the people who need it even more so. And yeah, these last points come together, you know. It's, you know, you are allowed to just tolerate and grit your teeth through work. You just need to survive, but find the people who care for you. Learn what rights you have, and often joining a union or finding people who will talk to you about what you need and what you can get is a vital step. I worry I've gone over time, but thank you very much. Here's Cartoon Alex again.